Welcome back to another episode of Shifty's 49ers Talk. It's your boy Shifty coming at you with another one. Today we're talking about the 2022 NFL Combine. Some of the players who've made themselves on my radar as a 49ers fan, and some of the players who've actually taken themselves off my radar. Without further ado, let's get into it. The first player that I want to talk about is going to be Calvin Austin III, wide receiver from Memphis. Now, here's a guy who's relatively small in stature. He's 5'8", 170 pounds. Now, to me, Calvin Austin is a guy who could be a much better version of Marquise Goodwin. Now, one of the first things that when Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch showed up in San Francisco, they signed Marquise Goodwin, wide receiver, as a free agent. I think Calvin Austin could be a much better version of him. Not only is he a more fluid receiver, but I think he's a more natural receiver. Marquise Goodwin always seemed like a track star who could play wide receiver. To me, Calvin Austin is a receiver who's also a track star. So that's one of those things where he can really stretch defenses where you have to honor his speed. Calvin Austin at the Combine ran a 4.3240, which is insane. He's really fast, he's really quick. But not only that, when you look at his athleticism, he was top 3 in the 40, at vertical, broad jump, 3-cone, and 20-yard shuttle. So his athleticism is through the roof. He's an excellent receiver at Memphis, the same school that wide receiver DJ Moore went to, who's had a lot of success in Carolina. So not only is this guy capable of running, capable of stretching defenses, but he's actually a very capable receiver too. So I like him in the third round with our own third round pick. If we have our own second round pick, and if we can get maybe a second round pick for Garoppolo, invest those two picks in the defense, I would love Calvin Austin in this offense in the third round. We have Debo, we have Ayuk, we have Jawan. Add in Calvin Austin the third, he can stretch the defense, make them force defenses to honor that deep pass, especially with Trey Lance, who has that cannon of an arm. I think this could be a great fit in the third round. Calvin Austin III, he is now significantly on my radar. Now, the first player that I want to talk about who is now no longer on my radar is going to be Kyren Williams, the running back from Notre Dame. Now, he's 5'9", 200 pounds, so he's not going to be the size of a player who can be a bell cow running back, who can be your number one running back who takes the majority of the snaps. So you're thinking, okay, maybe he's a change of pace back, maybe he has speed. Well, he actually had the slowest 40 of all the running backs at the Combine. And if we know anything about this Kyle Shanahan style offense, is that speed kills. All of our running backs who were very effective, Raheem Mostert, Elijah Mitchell, these guys have breakaway speed. So at this point, I'm looking at Kyren Williams, who prior to the Combine was looked at as maybe like a late second, early third round pick. I think for us, he's now maybe a fifth or sixth round pick. If he falls there, maybe at that point we would take a gamble on him. But at this end of the day, initially I thought he was a scheme fit with our zone blocking defense, but at this point, I just don't think we could trust him. I think he would be somewhat of a waste of a pick, considering where he's projected to go. I think there will be another team who picks him in the third or fourth round. For me, I would probably wait until the fifth or sixth round for Kyren Williams. And at the end of the day, I'm not really a fan of a lot of the running backs that come out of Notre Dame. There aren't too many running backs who've come from Notre Dame in recent years who've had success in the NFL. Now, feel free to prove me wrong, but that's just my opinion. And at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of other options that we could either stick with from last year, or else there's other options in the draft this year. Alrighty, so one of my favorite players who I've seen since the Combine is going to be tight end Jalani Woods. He's 6'7", 260 from Virginia. Now here's a guy who is incredibly explosive, super fluid in his movement, which is rare at that size. Now to me, one of the big things that Kyle Shanahan is looking for is to have another option at tight end who could be a very legitimate weapon at receiver from that second tight end position. There's a reason why we brought in Jordan Reed a couple years ago. And I think one of the big letdowns of the offense is Ross Dwelly never really progressed farther than a tight end number 3. Charlie Werner is much more of a blocking tight end. So I think Jalani Woods could be the kind of guy who develops into a very, very decent number 2 tight end. Now, I think he could be had by the 49ers in the 4th round. So let's say if we go defense with our second round pick. Let's say we get a second round pick for Jimmy Garoppolo. We go defense there. Then I think maybe Calvin Austin the 3rd. And then we have Jelani Woods in the 4th round. I think that could be an ideal scenario, not only for us, but for Jelani Woods, where he's not going to be the focal point. Of course, we have George Kittle. We have a bunch of other weapons on offense. So Jelani could come along relatively slowly, but then we could unleash his physicality, his athleticism, and opposing defenses will not expect it. So I think Jelani Woods could be a great fit for us in the 4th round. Bring him along slowly, and he could be a weapon that teams will have to respect. The next player that I want to say, who is a guy who is now off my radar as a 49ers fan, is going to be guard Darian Kinnard from Kentucky. Now, here's a guy who I think many people would think that he could very legitimately go in the 2nd or 3rd round of the 2022 NFL draft. To me, he tested near the bottom of everything in the combine: athleticism, speed, power, all of that stuff. He tested near the bottom. So for me, when it comes to the kind of offense that we run, what we expect out of our offensive linemen to be athletic, to be able to get to a spot in terms of run blocking where you can make the block on a defensive player to allow the running back to spring a big gain, I don't think this is the guy. Now, I think he could be very much a fit more so in the Jim Harbaugh offense that we used to run when it was Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman. But with Kyle Shanahan and the zone blocking scheme, I just don't think he is a fit for us at all, especially when you look at some of these numbers from the combine. Now, to me, the biggest thing is when it comes to the draft is I like to look for value. And I think when you have to draft a guy like Darian Canard in the 2nd or 3rd round, I would actually like a bunch of other guys, maybe in the 5th, 6th, or 7th round at guard who we could develop for a year or two and then work themselves into that role. So at the end of the day, I'm like, get Darian Canard. He's a good prospect, but for the 49ers, he is now off my board. I'm not even looking at him unless it's like the 5th or 6th round when it becomes a point where the talent would supersede the scheme fit, then I would look at him, but for now he's off my board. Now, the last player I'm going to talk about in this video has quickly become one of my favorite prospects in the 2022 NFL draft, and that is Dominique Robinson, the edge rusher from Miami, Ohio. He's 6'5", 256, so ideal size for a speed rusher in the defense that the 49ers love to run under DeMeco Ryans, and I love this defense. Now, Dominique Robinson, here's the thing. He actually graded out top half of every single category that he tested in at the combine, whether it was the bench press where you're testing strength, whether it was speed, whether it was anything else, agility. He was in the top half of every single category, not just one or two, but every single category. Now, here's the thing with Dominique Robinson. He actually was a wide receiver initially, and he converted to defensive end. So he's very much a developmental guy. Here's the great thing. In San Francisco, we have a great defensive coordinator, DeMeco Ryans, and potentially an even better defensive line coach in Chris Kasorik. So if anyone is going to get the potential out of Dominique Robinson, I think it's the 49ers. But not only the coaching, but we have guys like Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, Javon Kinlaw, all these other players who've developed not only since the college game, but while they've been in the NFL. So if Dominique Robinson is thinking like, hey, this could be the perfect situation where he will never be the focus of the offense because we have so many other weapons, but he's going to get great coaching. He's going to be given time. There'll be little to no expectation because to me, Dominique Robinson is maybe like a 5th round pick kind of option. So he's one of those guys similar to potentially like a Paris Harrelson, rest in peace, who we drafted a number of years ago, where you give him some time to develop. Maybe he plays a lot in preseason and could be a rotational pass rusher should we not be able to bring back guys like Arden Keys. So I really like the potential of Dominique Robinson. He has potential through the roof. He could be one of those guys where he's drafted in the 5th round and then in 2 years' time it's like, how did this guy fall here? Well, of course, he's very raw at the position, but to me, at the end of the day, the value is there, the potential is there. So in the 5th round, if he falls to the 6th round, I'd be ecstatic to have him there. But I think he's a guy who could really come in and in a year or two could show just the value that he is at that position with the raw talent that he has. Now, this pretty much sums up my video in terms of the combine. Who are some of the players that have really come onto my radar? Some of the players who I've taken off my radar. Of course, guys have increased and decreased their values. I do want to say though, as much as I've talked about these players in this video and everything, the combine should be taken with a grain of salt because these players train specifically for a lot of what they do at the combine. Now, for me personally, I like to look at the tape. I think the tape is key in terms of how they did in college, how they match up against other players of their similar talent, other players of their similar experience. So I'm never going to say the combine should supersede anything, but it's great to see just raw statistical data on these guys and see how fast they are, how tall they are, how big they are, how strong they are. So I'm going to sum it up here. There's a lot of guys who I really like right now. There's some guys who I'm not crazy about. But guys, feel free to leave your comments below. See what you think about my guys who I really like, my guys who I'm thinking are not so great. Please, absolutely give your suggestions on guys who stood out to you in the combine. And at the end of the day, I'm going to say 2 things, and you know what they are. The butt counts. And I'm going to catch y'all on the flip side.